The hoard was discovered in a field southwest of the village of Hoxne in Suffolk on the 16th of November, 1992. Tenant farmer Peter Watling had lost a hammer and asked his friend Eric Laws, a retired gardener and amateur metal detectorist, to help him search for it. While searching the field with his metal detector, Laws discovered silver spoons, gold jewelry and numerous gold and silver coins. After retrieving several items, he and Watling notified the landowners, Suffolk County Council, and the police, without attempting to dig up any more items. The following day, a team of archaeologists from the Suffolk Archaeology Unit carried out an emergency excavation of the site. The entire hoard was excavated in one day, with several large blocks of undisturbed material being removed for laboratory excavation. The area was searched with metal detectors within a 30-meter, 98-foot radius of the find. Peter Watling's missing hammer was also found and donated to the British Museum. The Hoxne Hoard contains several rare and important objects, such as a gold body chain and silver gilt pepper pots, Piperatoria, including the Empress pepper pot. The hoard is also of particular archaeological importance, as it was excavated by professional archaeologists, with the objects largely intact. We examined all of this in the first part of the film. We will now continue with the analysis of the remaining silver, metal and organic objects from the hoard. The silver Tigress is a massive cast statuette, weighing 480 grams, 17 ounces, and measuring 15.9 centimeters, 6.3 inches, from head to tail. It was designed to be soldered onto some other object as its handle. Traces of tin have been found under its hind legs, which have the smoothly concave curve. It looks most aesthetically pleasing when the serpentine curves of its head, back, rump and tail form a line at an angle of about 45 degrees, when the hind legs are flat, allowing for their curve. Its sex is clear, as there are 6 swollen nipples under its belly. It is elaborately decorated on its back, but its underside is rather superficially finished. Its stripes are represented by 2 engraved lines, with black and yellow inlay between them, in most places not meeting the engraved lines. Neither its elongated body nor the distribution of the stripes are accurate to the species. It has a long dorsal stripe running from the skull along the spine to the beginning of the tail, which is typical of cat stripes, not tigers. The figure has no stripes around its tail, which thickens at the end, suggesting a thick tip of fur like a lion's tail, which tigers do not have, although Roman art usually gives them one. The large collection of silver spoons includes 51 carcliaria, which are small spoons with shallow bowls, and long, tapering handles with a pointed end, which were used for piercing eggs and piercing small pieces of food since the Romans did not use forks at the table. There are 23 signs, which are much rarer, having large, rather shallow spoons with shorter handles with bird heads, and about 20 deep round spoons or small ladles and strainers. Many of these are decorated with abstract motifs, and some with dolphins or fantastic sea creatures. Many of the spoons are decorated with the Christian monogram cross or Chi Rho symbol, and sometimes with the Greek letters Alpha and Omega, a name for Jesus, who is described as Alpha and Omega in the Book of Revelation. 3 sets of 10 spoons and several other spoons are decorated with such Christian symbols. As is often the case with Roman silver spoons, many also have an inscription in Latin, either simply naming their owner or wishing their owner long life. A total of 8 different people are named, 7 on the spoons and 1 on the only cup in the hoard: Aurelius Ursicinus, Dacianus, Eucherius, Faustinus, Peregrinus, Quintus, Sanctus, and Silvicola. The most common name is Taurelius ursicinus, which occurs on a set of 5 carcliarii and 5 ladles. It is not known whether any of the people named in these inscriptions were involved in hiding the hoard or were even alive at the time it was buried. Although only one of these inscriptions is explicitly Christian, vivas in Deo, inscriptions on silver spoons including a name followed by vivas or vivat can usually be identified as Christian in other late Roman hordes. For example, the Mildenhall hoard has 5 spoons, 3 with Chi-Rho monograms and 2 with vivas inscriptions, Placentia vivas and Papitedo vivas. The formula verbone vivas also occurs on a spoon from the Thetford hoard, but while the Thetford hoard spoons have predominantly pagan inscriptions, for example, Dei Fau Medugeni to the god Faunus Medugenus born of Mid, the Hoxne Hoard has no inscriptions of a specifically pagan nature, and the hoard can be considered to have originated from a Christian household or households. It is often assumed that Roman spoons with the Chi-Rho or vivas monograms in the Deo formula were either baptismal spoons, perhaps presented at adult baptisms, or were used in the Eucharist ceremony, but this is not certain. There are also a number of small objects of uncertain function, described as toilet utensils. Some are picks, others may have been scrapers, and 3 have empty sockets at one end, which probably contained organic material, such as bristles, for making a brush. Their size would have been suitable for cleaning teeth or applying cosmetics, among other possibilities. The average purity of the silverware is 96%. The remainder of the metal consists of copper and a small amount of zinc, with traces of lead, gold, and bismuth. The zinc was probably present in the copper brass used to alloy the silver when the objects were made, and the lead, gold, and bismuth were probably present in the unrefined silver ore. The iron objects found in the hoard are probably the remains of the outer wooden chest. They consist of large iron rings, double-barred loops and hinges, strap hinges, probable lock components, angle brackets, wide and narrow iron strips and nails. Organic finds are rarely well documented with hoards, as most coin and hoard finds are hastily removed by the prospector or have previously been destroyed by agricultural work rather than excavated. Hoxne's organic finds include bone, wood, other plant material and leather. Small fragments of a decorated ivory pyxis, a cylindrical box with a lid, were found, along with more than 150 small-shaped pieces of bone inlay or veneer, probably from a wooden box or boxes that had decomposed. Miniature fragments of wood adhering to metal objects were identified as belonging to 9 types of timber, all of British origin. Wood traces associated with the iron fittings of the outer chest established that it was made of oak. The silver latches and hinges were from 2 small wooden boxes or caskets, one of ornamental cherry wood and one of yew. A little wheat straw survived from a lining between the plain silver bowls, which also bear faint traces of linen. Fragments of leather were too destroyed to identify. The initial metallurgical analysis of the hoard was carried out in late 1992 and early 1993 by Cowell and Hook for the procedural purposes of the coroner's inquest. This analysis used X-ray fluorescence, a technique which was later reapplied to clean sample surfaces. All 29 gold jewelry items were analyzed and found to contain silver and copper. The results are typical of Roman silver in hoards of the period in terms of the presence of copper, alloyed with the silver to harden it, and trace elements. One repaired bowl showed a mercury-based solder. The large sleeve of pierced gold, opus interracile, shows traces of hematite on the reverse, which would probably have been used as a type of jeweler's rouge. This is the earliest known and documented use of this technique on Roman jewelry. The gilded items show the presence of mercury, indicating the mercury gilding technique. The black inlay on the cast silver Tigress shows the niello technique, but with silver sulfide rather than lead sulfide. The stone settings, where the garnet and amethyst remain in the body chain, have spaces where the pearls are thought to have been set, and indicate elemental sulfur as a glue or filler. The Hox treasure was buried during a period of great upheaval in Britain, marked by the collapse of Roman power in the province, the departure of most of the Roman army, and the first wave of Anglo-Saxon attacks. Attacks on Italy by the Visigoths around the beginning of the 5th century led the general Stilicho to recall some Roman troops from Rhaetia, Gaul, and Britain. While Stilicho held off the Visigothic attack, the western provinces were left defenseless against the Suebi, Alans, and Vandals, who crossed the frozen Rhine in 406 and took over Gaul. The remaining Roman troops in Britain, fearing that the invaders would cross the English Channel, elected a series of their own emperors to lead the defense. The first 2 such emperors were murdered by disgruntled soldiers within a few months, but the third, who would proclaim himself Constantine III, led a British force across the English Channel into Gaul in an attempt to become Roman emperor. After scoring victories against the barbarians in Gaul, Constantine was defeated by an army loyal to Honorius and beheaded in 411. Meanwhile, Constantine's departure left Britain vulnerable to attack by Saxon and Irish raiders. After 410, Roman histories provide little information about events in Britain. Writing in the following decade, St. Jerome describes Britain after 410 as a province abounding in tyrants, suggesting the collapse of central authority and the rise of local leaders in response to repeated raids by Saxons and others. By 452, a Gallic chronicler managed to state that about 10 years earlier, the Britons, who had hitherto suffered from various calamities and misfortunes, were reduced by the power of the Saxons. Who exactly owned the Hoxne Hoard and their reasons for burying it are not known, and probably never will be. But the hoard itself and its context provide some important clues. The hoard was clearly carefully buried some distance from any buildings. The hoard very likely represents only a fraction of the precious metal wealth of the person or people who owned it. Many common types of jewelry are missing, as are large serving items such as those found in the Mildenhall hoard. It is unlikely that anyone would have owned the rich gold and silver objects found in the Hoxne Hoard without also owning items in these other categories. Whoever owned the hoard also had wealth in the form of land, livestock, buildings, furniture, and clothing. At most, the Hoxne Hoard represents a moderate portion of the wealth of someone wealthy. Conversely, it may represent a negligible portion of the wealth of a family that was incredibly wealthy. The occurrence of the names Aurelius Ursicinus and De Juliana on items in the Hoxne Hoard should not imply that people with these names were in possession of the rest of the hoard, either at the time of its burial or before. There are no historical references to Aurelius Ursicinus in Britain during this period. While the Marcus Aurelius Ursicinus is recorded in the Praetorian Guard in Rome between 222 and 235, a soldier or official of the late 4th or early 5th century would have been more likely to have assumed the imperial nomen Flavius rather than Aurelius. This leads Tomlin to suggest that the name Aurelius Ursicinus may sound old-fashioned. It would certainly have been more appropriate for a provincial landowner than an army officer or civil servant. There are a number of theories as to why the hoard was buried. One is that the hoard represents a deliberate attempt to preserve wealth, perhaps in response to one of the many upheavals that Roman Britain faced in the early 5th century. However, this is not the only hypothesis. Archaeologist Peter Guest argues that the hoard was buried because the items in it were used as part of a gift exchange system and were no longer needed after Britain separated from the Roman Empire. A third hypothesis is that the Hoxne Hoard represents the proceeds of a robbery, buried to avoid detection. The Hoxne Hoard comes from the later part of a century, around 350 or 450, from which an unusually large number of hoards have been found, mostly from the outskirts of the empire. Such hoards vary in character, but many include the large pieces of silver tableware that are missing from the Hoxne Hoard: dishes, jugs, and cups, bowls and cups, some plain but very highly decorated. Two other large hoards found in modern East Anglia in the last century are from the 4th century. Both are now in the British Museum. The Mildenhall hoard from Suffolk consists of 30 items of silver tableware deposited in the late 4th century, very large and elaborately decorated, such as the Great Dish. The Water Newton hoard from Cambridgeshire is smaller, but is the earliest hoard that is clearly Christian in character, clearly belonging to a church or chapel. The diverse collection probably includes items made in Britain. The Kaiserorgst hoard from the site of Augusta Raurica in modern Switzerland, now Basel, contains 257 objects, including an elaborately decorated banqueting service. The Esquiline hoard, found in Rome, apparently came from a wealthy Roman family of the late 4th century and includes several large objects, including the Ark of the Project. Most of the Esquiline hoard is in the British Museum, as are bowls and vessels from the Carthage hoard, which belonged to a prominent family in Roman Africa around 400. The Mildenhall, Kaiserorgst, and Esquiline hoards include large items of crockery and cutlery. Other hoards, such as those found at Thetford and Borderines, consist mainly of coins, jewelry, and small serving items. These two hoards are probably pagan votive offerings. A hoard from Traprain Law in Scotland contains decorated Roman silver pieces, cut and folded, showing respect for the value of their metal alone, and may represent the spoils of a raid. Hoxne, where the hoard was found, is located in Suffolk in modern-day East Anglia. Although there was no large aristocratic villa in the Hoxne area, there was a nearby Roman settlement from the 1 to 4 centuries at Skol, about 3.2 kilometers (2.0 miles) northwest of Hoxne, at the junction of two Roman roads. One of these, the Pye Road, now the A140, linked Venter Icenorum, Caister Street, Edmund, with Camulodunum, Colchester, and Londinium, London. The field in which the hoard was found has been shown by excavations in 1994 to have probably been cleared by the early Bronze Age, when it began to be used for farming and settlement. Some settlement activity occurred near the site in the first half of the first millennium before Christ, but there is no evidence of Roman buildings in the immediate vicinity. The field where the hoard was deposited may have been cultivated during the early phase of the Roman period, but the apparent absence of 4th century coins suggests that it may have been converted to pasture or otherwise reverted to woodland by this time. The Hoxne Hoard is not the only Roman treasure hoard discovered in the area. In 1781, some workmen dug up a lead box by the river at Clint Farm in Eye, for 0.8 kilometers, 3.0 miles, south of Skol and 3.2 kilometers, 2.0 miles, southwest of Hoxne. The box contained around 600 Roman gold coins dating from the reigns of Valens and Valentinian I, who ruled 364, 375, Gratian, 375, 383, Theodosius I, 378, 395, Arcadius, 395, 408, and Honorius, 393, 423. It was the largest hoard of Roman gold coins ever discovered in Britain, but the coins were scattered in the 18th and 19th centuries and are now not easily identifiable in coin collections. As a result, the connection, if any, between the hoard and that at Hoxne cannot be determined, even if the proximity suggests that they may have been related. Soon after the discovery of the Hoxne Hoard, there was speculation, based on the name Faustinavivas engraved on one of the spoons, that it may have come from the Villa Faustini, which is recorded in Itinerary V of the Antonine Itinerary. The exact location of Villa Faustini is unknown, but as it was the first station after Colchester, it is thought to have been somewhere on the Pye Road, modern A140, and one possible location for this is the modern village of Skol, just a few miles from Hoxne. However, this early theory has since been rejected, as Faustine is a historically common name and occurs on only one spoon in the hoard. Furthermore, the logic of using inscriptions on individual objects in the hoard to determine ownership of the hoard as a whole is generally considered to be flawed. Based on the dating of the coins in the hoard, most of which belong to the period 394–405, it is also suggested that the contents of the hoard originally belonged to a military family that accompanied Count Theodosius to Britain in 368–369, and which may have left with Constantine III in 407. The treasure was acquired by the British Museum in April 1994. As the museum's entire purchase fund amounted to only £1.4 million at the time, the treasure had to be purchased with the help of donors including the National Heritage Memorial Fund, the National Art Collections Fund, now the Art Fund, and the J. Paul Getty Trust. Grants from these and other benefactors enabled the museum to raise the £1.75 million needed for the acquisition. Objects from the hoard have been on display almost continuously since the hoard was received by the British Museum. Some objects were on display at the museum as early as September 1993 in response to public interest. Much of the hoard was exhibited at Ipswich Museum in 1994 and 1995. Since 1997, the most important objects have been on permanent display at the British Museum in a new and expanded Roman Britain Gallery, Room 49, together with the roughly contemporary Thetford Hoard and adjacent to the Mildenhall Hoard, which contains large silver vessels of a type not found in the Hoxne Hoard. Some objects from the Hoxne Hoard were included in Treasure, Finding Our Past, a touring exhibition which was shown in 5 cities in England and Wales in 2003. A plexiglass reconstruction of the chest and the inner boxes in which it was deposited was created for this tour, showing the arrangement of the different types of objects with sample items inside. It is now part of the permanent exhibition in London, along with other items displayed more traditionally. The first comprehensive study of the hoard was published in the Complete Catalogue of Coins by Peter Guest in 2005 and in the Catalogue of Other Objects by Catherine Jones in 2010. The hoard was third in a list of British archaeological finds selected by experts at the British Museum for the 2003 BBC television documentary Our Top 10 Treasures, which includes archive footage of its discoverer Eric Laws and the pepper pot The Empress, and was selected as item 40 in the 2010 BBC Radio 4 Series A History of the World in 100 Objects. The discovery and excavation of the Hoxne Hoard improved the relationship between the archaeological profession and the metal detecting community. Archaeologists were pleased that Laws reported the find promptly and largely undisturbed, allowing professional excavations. Metal detectorists note that Laws' efforts were appreciated by the archaeological profession. The Treasure Trove Act 1996 is credited with making more finds available to archaeologists. The act changed the law so that the landowner and the person who finds the treasure have a large share of the value of the find. The method of finding the Hoxne Hoard with a metal detector and its wide publicity helped to change the previous common law system of treasure hunting to a statutory legal framework that takes into account technology such as metal detectors, provides incentives for treasure hunters to report finds, and takes into account the interests of museums and scientists. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the Golden Treasure channel. Stay tuned for new updates and give the video a thumbs up in support.